has to take very seriously into account this qualitative extension of the use of the PTA and its ramifications. Now, this is not an accident. This is not just some law enforcement guys who've gone and picked up this student and thrown him in jail and put him under the PTA, because the extension of the PTA to non-terrorist activities has been doctrinally justified by no less than the President of Sri Lanka, Ranil Wickremesinghe, who I might add is the first time that Sri Lanka has had a president who has not been elected even to parliament, because we once had a president who stepped in when the elected president was assassinated, but the person who stepped in had been elected to parliament. So President Wickremesinghe, on several occasions, not just one occasion, has taken pains to differentiate between various strands of the Aragalaya, or the mass protest movement, mainly driven by the youth. And he has classified a certain unnamed strand as, well, he named it recently, he's linked it to a registered political party, as terrorist, as violent. So everything that is violent is now classified as terrorist, though we know that even homicide is prosecutable and has been for centuries under normal law. So this is not just a dangerous extension of the practice of incarceration under the PTA, but it is a dangerous ideological and doctrinal extension of the use of the PTA in context and against phenomena, individuals that are not in the least describable by any universal definition as terrorist or acts of terrorism, or as linked to terrorism, or sympathetic to terrorism, because there's no terrorism that the world saw during the period concerned, the mass protest movement. There was a death at the hands of a provincial mob. There were shootings by law enforcement authorities and casualties as a result, but there was no organized use of arms by anybody, including these young people who have been locked up under the PTA. They've never been even seen with a knife or a pair of scissors in the context of the protest movement. So this is very dangerous. We are not talking about what we've been talking about since 1979. This is the parameters have been broadened in a very, very dangerous way. Now, why is this? I would say that this is linked to this unique situation that exists in Sri Lanka, a crisis of legitimacy, where, as I said earlier, we have a president who has not been popularly elected. He was selected by the parliament by 134 members of the ruling party. He was not even elected to the parliament. He was nominated on what is known as the national list. And the last time he won a popular election was 7 years ago, in 2015 August. The last time he ran for election, for office, so he contested at an election, he lost his own constituency and his party did not win a single seat nationwide. So there's a crisis of legitimacy. When there is a crisis of legitimacy, especially in a country like Sri Lanka, which is Asia's, and actually Afro-Asia, the oldest democracy, now in an even more restive mood than before, as we saw from the Aragalaya or the mass protest movement, then that deficit of legitimacy is thought to be bridged through repression. Repression using the most extreme legislation, which was conceived of in the context of terrorism, but is now being drawn over to use against movements of civil disobedience. And it's being doctrinally justified from the very top. And this will continue as long as the crisis of legitimacy lasts, and the crisis of legitimacy will last until there is an election and Sri Lanka has once again the normal situation for Sri Lanka of a popularly elected leader with a mandate. Now, I would say that one must not rest content with this National Security Act that's on the way. Where is it coming from? Have we heard who has drafted it? All we know is that the National Security Act was incubated in the same system at the same time as the presidency of Gotabaya Rajapaksa. And that administration was a very militarist administration. It would seem from reports in the public domain that the securocracy, the security bureaucracy and the Ministry of Defense has been one of the players in formulating this National Security Act. We have not seen or heard of anyone else being involved in this. It has not been, as far as I know, shown to and certainly not signed off by the BASL, the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, or even the Human Rights Council of Sri Lanka. There's not been transparency, there's not been public debate. And coming as it did from the womb of the militarist, racist Gotabaya Rajapaksa administration, the same administration that produced the 20th Amendment, which hyper-centralized power in the presidency, which still remains, by the way, one cannot but be concerned about the content and scope and scale of the National Security Act, which is supposed to be an improvement on the PTA. But if the PTA is being extended in its use and justified by the unelected rule of the country, there is no reason to think that the National Security Act will do anything other than what the PTA has been doing. So I would say that the international community has to be very aware, because this is not just, the PTA is not just a residue of the past. It has been reactivated and extended in a very dangerous way to cover up the crisis of legitimacy. And in the imminent future, it will doubtless be used against trade unionists and the social movement, because there is an economic package. And here I'm not blaming the IMF, because we have a president whose neoliberal views on the economy have long anteceded any IMF program and are far to the right of the IMF. So it's he's piggybacking his program on the IMF, and the social movement in Sri Lanka will definitely resist it, at which point the PTA or its equivalent will be used en masse against the leaders of the social movement and the democratic movement. So we already have over 3,500 people in custody. They're not in custody under the PTA, but it's a trial run. The Vasantha Mudalige case is an emblematic case. It is emblematic of this dangerous extension. And the dangerous extension is symptomatic of and signals where we are headed. So I end by calling on the international community, with the international human rights community at the core, to be alert and vigorously resist this draconian extension of an already draconian law. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jayathilaka. Thank you for your excellent input into the panel. Obviously, there are two main points you've made, which were really insightful. One was that how the PTA has been taken out of context in terms of implementing on the ground, and also how it has been also used against democratic activities within the country, starting from the recent Aragale event and the uprising of the citizens against certain corruption within the country, including economical mishandling. It's very insightful. Thank you.